with a structured sales approach or the giving without expectation and building a brand, like it's those two things which is so different, but you just kind of have to find how you can work them together. Now it's just so competitive in terms of the capturing of the initial attention because there's just so many voices and people on the platform. There was no real expectation or anything on the other end of it. I just thought it was cool to be able to get my message out to people who I thought could benefit from it, you know?
Welcome to Not the Rob Bell Podcast, where we talk with business owners, marketers, and professionals to extract what makes people and businesses successful.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Not the Rob Bell Podcast. Up next, I've got Freezma Fitness. With 6.5 million YouTube views and 140,000 people on his social media, we talk to him about all things content and how to convert those likes into sales. It's coming up now. Hey everyone. We anticipated this podcast as being a weekly event, but we thought with everything going on right now that twice weekly would be twice as good. So we might not hold this forever and we may go back to weekly, but enjoy the extra episodes right now. So Freezma, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's really great to virtually see you.
You too, bro. Good to be here.
And so you're holed up in isolation in sunny Brisbane or somewhere there?
Yeah, just down on the Gold Coast. So I'm very fortunate to be. I think this is probably one of the best places to be in isolation, honestly.
Hey, it could be worse. It could be, minus 20 and snowing outside, right? So
exactly, and it's not here, so we're
cool.
good.
So, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is I know that you're obviously currently very prominent, YouTuber, very active on Instagram and Facebook, that sort of thing. But one of the interesting things about your profile on YouTube especially is that you've been doing it for quite some time. And, your profile says it was created about 2011, and I think you were posting pretty actively back then as well. Can you tell us, really briefly how that's kind of changed over almost 10 years of YouTube? Because it's a pretty different space to what it started out as.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, the one thing that's really changed now is that there's a lot of saturation in it compared to when I first got into it. That's obvious. I think that's the most obvious change. That's with anything, Instagram, Facebook, all of them, you know what I mean? So I was fortunate enough to be, starting what I was doing in the beginning. But in a sense as well, the mindset of being in social media back then wasn't really so much what it is now. I think a lot of people get into it because they see the opportunities, whereas back then when I was kind of doing it, I could see the opportunity in terms of there's no doubt when you're building a community of people following you, there's benefit to that. But really in terms of kind of knowing about business and the monetization side of it, it wasn't kind of clear cut like it is now. I think people just see it is a very powerful tool, but I think back then more of the creators on there were just more, I feel like it was a bit more authentic personally, but yeah.
One thing we haven't mentioned is that you're obviously in the fitness space and compete in physique competitions and provide personal training and that sort of thing. And it really has evolved in particular in that space. But when you first started out, you were probably more just documenting your journey and sharing what you were doing with no real sort of business intention in mind.
Yeah. There was no real expectation or anything on the other end of it. It was more so, I just thought it was cool to be able to get my message out to people who I thought could benefit from it,
And because the volume of traffic has changed pretty substantially too. I mean, you've got 40,000 odd followers on, or 40,000 subscribers on YouTube, and about 140,000 between YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. But I mean, back 10 years ago, having 500 followers was, pretty good, and having a couple of thousand was sort of a big deal, right?
Definitely, man. It's insane because, personally, I actually started on Facebook, where I started with most of my posting and building an audience. YouTube was, I think I just ended up uploading a couple of vids that did good on Facebook. I just put them on YouTube because I don't know, I wasn't on YouTube as much, but I just kind of got them up for the sake of it. And then it was probably, it must have been around 2014 to 2015, I started seeing like YouTube was really where it was at in terms of building a close and deep relationship with people, because Facebook just started to cut its reach and promote a bit more marketing. So it was a couple of years there where it just really just slashed the kind of reach. I felt that on my Facebook page. So I think that's when I kind of turned more to YouTube.
Because early on, Facebook's page algorithm was, it really would weight it almost the same as having a friend, whereas now they're really geared towards, it's a pay-to-play sort of operation. And, it does get some reach, but there was a very marked change in how those likes on Facebook would actually be able to engage with your content, and without them liking or sharing or something, and providing a real hard interaction, there was so little of your content actually getting seen.
Yeah, it's insane. Like literally back when Facebook, when I was first on it, the reach was just like, for perspective, maybe I would have like, it was definitely a huge percentage of people seeing every post that I ever did. It must have been upwards of 80%, I'd say, seeing everything differently.
And so was that where you saw the most of the growth in Facebook originally? Was like, did you, or was it still sort of comparable to YouTube in terms of volume?
Definitely no. Facebook was like where it really started for me. That's because even I feel like YouTube didn't really even start to get, because now YouTube is like extremely popular. It probably didn't start to get more on the popular side until maybe like 3 years ago, I'd say. I see a lot more people are on YouTube, watching YouTube videos, doing research through YouTube and all that. But I think, before, like, in 2016, 2015, YouTube was still, even though YouTube's been around since 2009, it's still, I feel like it wasn't even mainstream back then. I feel it's just kind of the last 3 years, maybe YouTube's become a bit more mainstream. But for me, Facebook was always, that was the platform that most people were on anyway, in terms of whether you're looking for stuff to follow, like everyone's on there for their friends and their connections. It's that network. So that was a real big one for me, building my brands at the start. In terms of who I am and my fitness content, Facebook was huge for me for sure. And then, like I said, once they started slashing the reach and going more towards that paid model for, they want you to advertise for your followers to see, that's when I transitioned into YouTube, because YouTube wasn't doing that. So it's just, a lot more bang for your buck, I guess, on YouTube. And I like on YouTube, it's more long form content, so you can really get a lot more of a message out. Whereas on Facebook, people are scrolling the feeds and they're not always there for long form. They just want to scroll past stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's really it's sort of about platform appropriate content. And I guess as a content creator, how do you approach that these days where, Instagram has really that small nugget content, Facebook has, from a minute to 10 minutes maybe, or going to long form. And then YouTube, I mean, their algorithm is specifically geared to 10 minutes plus. So how do you approach that from a content creation standpoint, and how you kind of think about that ahead of time?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, like, it's funny because for me, I have always put a lot of my focus on YouTube, but I've always done Instagram as well. In terms of Facebook, quite often I don't even have a posting strategy for Facebook. I might just share something oddly from my Instagram because there is a little bit of audience there, but I've been pretty slack with that. I've really kind of just gone off Facebook. So mainly, like, my business is pretty leveraged on Instagram and YouTube. But yeah, it's interesting, even with YouTube, like, I was kind of underrated Instagram. I thought, it's just too short form. You can't build as much of a connection with people. But the Instagram's always really supplemented my YouTube very well. So I pick up a lot of clients in terms of my online personal training. They'll almost they know who I am from YouTube because they've watched some long format videos. They feel like they can get a better gauge on me personally. And Instagram's kind of that communication platform where people can actually DM me and say, hey, I want to be a client or something like that. Or, message me about when I share some gym stees, like some photos on Instagram of the new gym stees. They'll say, oh, yeah, this looks cool. But whereas YouTube doesn't really have that communication aspect to it. So I think that's kind of something that's, yeah, I've always thought, oh, yo, YouTube's the main thing, but Instagram's just as important for me anyway, because that's where I have a lot of interaction with people.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting watching. I mean, YouTube comment fields are notoriously trollish in terms of,
They're very yeah, exactly, right?
and it's very interesting to watch. Whereas on Instagram, it is fairly personal and still the internet, but it's it is more engaging in the conversation, and whereas YouTube seems to be just strange comments around. I don't know, the dog in the background.
And I'll tell you why. It's because people who have YouTube accounts, there's nothing personal links to it. It's whereas Instagram, people are on Instagram, again, similar to Facebook, because they've got their connections of friends and everything on there. They're posting their lives. Most people don't have a YouTube account where they're actively showing their profile. So it just, I guess that's got to be the reason why, because yeah, I mean, there's still anonymous accounts on Instagram, but
sure. And you can create a new one quickly, but it helps reduce that incidence rate. So you touched on something interesting there. You've got your Gymstees merch store and that sort of thing. One thing I think that people really overestimate or maybe underestimate is how easily they can just slip in and just pummel ads into content. And so obviously that's how, or one of your revenue streams for monetizing content is by selling merchandise. How have you found, what do you see that the mistakes or the things that really do work for you in terms of not getting too hard on the sell and engaging in, content first and sell second, because people are developing a connection with you and then want to support you sort of as a secondary thing. Have you got any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it's it's a really deep, like the idea of just doing more of a sales tactic and then providing good quality content with no expectation. They're so different, yet they both have their time and place. You know what I mean? So realistically, yeah, a lot of the time when I say, oh, yo, guys, I'm doing a new Gymstees launch, here's the stuff. There's a percentage of people buying because they like the way it looks. There's a percentage of people buying because they like my brand and who I am, and they want to support me, and because they appreciate content that I've put out for free for so many years, or the way I've made them feel, or whether it's a message or something like that. But there's that factor which kind of still comes into that decision to purchase or buy into the brand. So it's they both exist, but they're both sometimes I feel like, for me personally, I'm not a hard enough seller. I am too in the mind space of just putting out good stuff just without trying to monetize it. But then I think sometimes that screws me up because I'm not consistent in terms of like, it's different for Gymstees. I feel like Gymstees is perfect because it's like, even same with my coaching, there's an interesting relationship there where you'll see some people, they're more structured in terms of their sales and they're just trying to do sales, but they actually can be quite successful at that if they've got a good product. And then there's that other side I said of, you're giving out stuff without the expectation, but a lot of the time, then when you do hit them with a sell, or there's something to buy that your audience is interested in, they get amongst because they appreciate all the hours you've put out without asking for anything. So
because it's a really counterintuitive strategy for a lot of our clients work in a more typical space, and when it comes to pure social media advertising, it's fairly easy to demonstrate the metrics on that. You can push advertise a product through social media with paid advertising with a reliable return and a reliable cost per click and all that sort of thing. But this strategy is a little bit harder to put clear roadmap on and demonstrate. If you put out 100 videos and 1,000 hours of content, then you will be able to sell. It's really hard to demonstrate that without actually doing it because it is such a dynamic thing. But and I think what you've touched on there in terms of monetizing and all the rest is, I think a lot of people think most of the revenue comes from YouTube monetization for a YouTuber or someone doing vlogging and things like that, I think there's an assumption that a lot of the money comes from actual, views and monetized videos. But from my understanding, it is more about the merchandising and that sort of secondary sales, the online coaching, the merchandise store, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is that sort of true to how you sort of see things?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people assume that monetization is a real big thing in YouTube. And they assume that if they see someone who looks like they're really successful on YouTube with money and stuff like that, a lot of people assume it's mainly from the ads on the YouTube vids. And there's, to an extent, but yeah, like when you actually look at the percentages of it, like what, in terms of what I get paid, even I know people who do make good money from their ads, but then again, they've got, a few 100,000 subscribers to be, making kind of all right just off the monetization. But what that pays in terms of how much effort you put into your vids, it's not much. It makes your videos not worth it. And then, but yeah, if you look at then the way you can pick up clients, if you've got 100,000 subscribers or whatever it is, it's like that percentage is just, I'm trying to put a figure on it for you even. I'm like, it's got to be at least, 10 to 20. It's got to be at least around like 20 times the monetization, I think.
From not indirect sales, effectively. So yeah, 10 or 20% from, or 5% if it's 20
not
times.
Even, no, not
so
even
5% from YouTube and the rest from the sideline businesses.
Yeah, I'd honestly say not even. It's not like 20% more. It's like 20 times more. Like
yeah, so 5% of total. Yeah, would be.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So about 5%.
Yeah,
exactly that. No, yeah. So I misunderstood you there.
No,
yeah,
that's okay. It's an interesting sort of thing, and I think a lot of content creators go in with no real plan because it does come from a bit of an organic sort of approach, and it's just I want to create content because I want to create content. But there is a certain business sense even to posting YouTube content itself in terms of thumbnailing and a little bit clickbaiting and effectively YouTube's a big video search engine. So, it's it really takes some thought and some structure and strategy to get that right. And have you sort of had to adapt, in particular YouTube, over time to cater for that?
Yeah, definitely the last 3 years with YouTube is really, I'd say about 3 years ago was when that stuff really started to matter. Before that, it was like you could literally put no effort into your thumbnail and title your video, and you'd still have a large percentage of your subscribers clicking. Somehow your vids would still end up with just as much views from recommended and people seen on search pages. But now it's just so competitive in terms of the capturing of the initial attention, because there's just so many voices and people on the platform. So that's always been something where maybe I haven't adapted as well, because I've always come from a place of just not overthinking content and just trying to organically like put out stuff. But it's definitely gotten to over the last 3 years is at that point where you actually have to structure the way you're at least going to put a title on your vid or the thumbnail before you even make the vid. And you'll even see, like, I know I've seen a lot lately with people I know who used to just kind of organically do content similar to myself. They've kind of gotten a lot more, tunnel vision in terms of like in terms of making their video itself very specific, and just really talking about a specific topic which is mentioned in the thumbnail or title. A few years ago, it was kind of like you could mention something in your thumbnail and title, and you could have a 20-minute vlog, and then there's like 2 minutes where it kind of references to the thumbnail and title. Now I see a lot of people, thinking in advance, okay, what's going to be a good video, and then titling and doing the thumbnail, and then just making the whole video, the whole 10 to 20 minutes, like on that topic specifically. So definitely the way content's been put out has definitely changed.
So I mean that sort of becomes a fairly straightforward process if you're deliberately producing videos saying, how to lift how deadlift form, or a training video or something like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of your content is vlogging as well. How does that play in, and how can you sort of pre-predict or pre-plan vlog to kind of cater for that niche, do you have to sort of do things in your life deliberately for the vlog, or, do you kind of just find a way to make it fit?
It's one of those things that even I'm trying to adapt to that now mentally, because my whole thing has always been, sometimes I feel torn between just trying to make some content and then, or just, showing what I'm actually doing anyway, because I don't even have to think about it and it's just really authentic. So again, like I was saying, with the structured sales approach or the giving without expectation and building a brand, like it's those two things which is so different, but you just kind of have to find how you can work them together. And that is, sometimes it's not an easy answer. And a lot of the time, yeah, people suit different styles. Like for me, I struggle. Sometimes I'll try like experiment and just make a vid just on a specific topic. But like for me, that just doesn't really come naturally, because it's always, but maybe that's just because I had so many years of it. I didn't need to specifically come up with anything. I could just document my life and I'll get the results that way. So it's like that programming in my head is, I'm trying to change it.
I guess it comes back to that organic approach that you started with as well.
Yeah.
One thing I often note with vloggers and YouTubers in particular is the sort of the attrition rate of content creators. Like there seems to be a high element of burnout, and obviously consistency is of production is something that's super important. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you had a little break in sort of in between your content career to some extent as well. How important do you think consistency is, and how much of a strain does that put on people in terms of, if you're producing videos every day or even every week, that's still a lot of production. Even doing this now, and it's a fairly straightforward thing. It's the energy that goes into it on both sides, before the call, after the call. It's huge. If you're doing that as a vlog and you're showing aspects of your life throughout the day, that's a pretty huge burden to take.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that's something that, like I agree. Like the consistency is the people who you see most successful on any platform, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, it is that consistency of, I think, being very, instead of being so generalized. So here's my problem is I've built an audience who likes me from over the years. I've kind of moved with what I've been consistent in. So there's been points of my life where I've been, really consistent for a couple of years in fitness and putting that out to my audience. And then there was a couple of years where I went off fitness altogether and I just was making entertaining vlogs. And then I was kind of picking up new audiences from these different things. And then now I've kind of got like this mixed audience where sometimes if I post, a fitness specific video, I've lost the audience of the people who had just joined me because they wanted to be entertained. And it goes vice versa as well with the other things. And there's other, a lot of people I know like my vids, especially a lot of my original vids I was kind of going very deep into topics on life and talking about things that most other people weren't really talking about. And then I've got that kind of audience where people really just love that content. But honestly, I feel like it's left me in a spot now, like I'm not growing as much as I would like, because I feel like I've been too dispersed over too much stuff.
Sure.
When I really look at people who are successful in terms of at least growing their channels, it's when they're just consistently in line with a certain way of posting or a topic, or it's really just kind of catering to that niche. It's like every time you post something, people almost know what it's about already because you always post about that. And I feel like for me, like sometimes I wish I could just be like that, but for me, I've got so many sides to me that I can't just go down that route, at least authentically.
I think it's a bit of a challenge from a personal aspect, I can assume, because we do evolve over time, and what's important to us, what we're focused on, can be important. And if you're deliberately catering for a specific audience and what they want to see, and we see that with content creators especially in particular niche, say, prominent vegan YouTubers or something who decide maybe that's not for them anymore, and they come out and they basically lose their audience overnight because they go in a different direction. And they may be one of the more extreme cases of that happening. But say you go from training videos to, philosophy about life, which, I've seen happen with a few channels, and they have, 2-3 million subscribers in some case, but maybe their video gets 5,000 views now. And, you can see how the impact that's having. But you go back a little bit and they've got hundreds of thousands, millions of views on some of these videos. So I guess it's you kind of have to roll with it, but carry your audience with you as much as you can.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like fortunate. I feel like I've got a good, like most of my audience I think can appreciate the fact that I've got so many different sides. But in terms of like just strategically, if you're just all about business and trying to grow your brand for your business, I think it is very important to just niche down and just try own that niche and put out just like consistent content so people always kind of know what they're getting from you. And then that way as well, like if you're trying to sell a product on the back of it, people know how much, consistently you put out on one piece of, like in one industry or whatever it is, so that like you're kind of the go-to purchase, for that person.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But then again, like for me, I just can't authentically just, like for me, I think because I've come from a spot of being able to just put out content and grow my audience with just whatever I feel like putting out in the early days, because it's changed so much. Like I said, I've kind of got the way of thinking in my head where it's just different to how it is now. See, most people now, they're looking at these avenues in terms of like, it's just business opportunity and what's the opportunity here. But for me, like I didn't even come into the space with that. So it's something I like learn as it develops and I see it. And then sometimes I kind of go with it and, say, okay, I need to start doing this now. And then other times I'm just like, I don't want to do this, so why should I? Yeah,
you want to put out the content that you want to put out, not just to toe the line and make a couple
and honestly, you'll find a lot. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you find a lot of people that end up very unhappy because they've moved on personally from the content that they're putting out and their audience is demanding, but their audience is demanding and like they feel almost trapped. You know what I mean? I've seen it happen to a few friends of mine and even just big people and around the place. You see it.
Makes sense. Well, yeah, and then they're sort of forced to put out the content that they don't want to just to keep the money coming in.
Yeah, or if they do pivot off, like you said, you see them just lose all their views, and a lot of people tune out. So it's an interesting thing, the social media.
I suppose because it's sort of it revolves around yourself as well. So it's not like you can, sell the channel and go off and do something else. You might, but it may not be too successful for the person that takes it over because they're really invested in you. But one thing that we often do in business is look for like joint venture partnerships and things like that, and how two businesses can work together. And I saw you do something similar with Vitruvian Physique, which is actually how you came on my radar, where you basically made a video about him. And so for those of us watching who don't know who this is another YouTuber who is based in Canada. And so I'm curious to know, was there a real deliberate kind of, we see YouTubers do a lot of collaboration videos and that sort of thing. Was there a deliberate sort of reach out there to try and make something happen, or did it just really come from a genuine place and it had, good benefits from there?
Yeah, that was cool. Honestly, with that, I mean, collaborations are so strong in the field of YouTube. Like if you're struggling to get on people, in terms of doing popular videos or something that's coming up on people's recommended, if you don't have like momentum, or if you're losing momentum, if you can be featured on another person's channel who has a very active audience, it's a very powerful thing. And that's why you see a lot of people on YouTube, they coordinate to, do collaborations and, make very specific arrangements to do it. But yeah, like for me, I've never gone down that route of trying to collaborate with many people. And again, whether that's something that maybe I shouldn't have, I don't know. Like, I remember there's just a point a few years ago where I saw a lot of people collaborating, and then, I'm on the other side of the industry, so I kind of know motives behind everything. And I know that people were just organizing to collab just in terms of like the business point of view, yet they weren't actually friends. They didn't actually have a relationship. And it's just kind of like, it is what it is, like that. Which is why I never really reached out to people. I only like to do collabs or anything like that if it's organic. But yeah, when like me and Vitruvian did the back and forth video, that was, I mean, his video was the first one where he said that he was doing his comp prep and he was looking ahead at me, who was a few weeks ahead in terms of doing my comp prep. And then that was, a source of, I guess, motivation or competition or something to just kind of hold him a bit more accountable and push him. So that was like not planned at all. He just, I just
That's right. I've actually got that backwards, because he actually did shout you out before you responded to him, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, that was cool. I saw that vid and I was like, oh yeah, this is, I wouldn't have known otherwise. Like, I mean, I know Igor, like from a few years ago, when he did first move to the Gold Coast. So he wasn't like a random guy I didn't know, but I think we did like maybe 1 or 2 vids back when I was on the Gold Coast. But again, that was just after like meeting up with him and just, we kind of were like, oh yeah, maybe we could collab or whatever. But, I always want to meet a person before I just say, hey, let's collab. It's like, so we met up and trained a few times beforehand, even before we first did a video together. But I guess, yeah, this was like 3 years later. And then he just randomly kind of gave me that feature on his channel, which was, very appreciated for myself as a smaller YouTube channel. I thought that was really cool. And I guess I did the other video back to him, which actually did get a lot of views. And then a lot of his audience, like yourself, you're saying even you saw me from me doing the vid about him, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's and it's all about that exposure. And because I mean, we watch, especially in the fitness industry, there's certain pockets where you may have half a dozen or a dozen prominent YouTubers all in the same, half of them even live together, and parts of Canada, parts of America, especially. Do you think that there's a real limit in opportunities for someone in Australia or New Zealand because we are halfway around the world?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot harder down here.
Do you think that there is some benefit to being unique and stand out against perhaps, sort of the American as well? Like everyone loves Aussies and Kiwis, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're asking some good questions, Rob. That's because it's funny, because this is stuff that I genuinely think about myself, But like, it's crazy because the American audience is just so huge that I would have thought maybe I'd be interesting to Americans, and I thought, maybe I could grow a lot out of getting American subscribers, but I just don't think they understand like the mass appeal of Americans. I think they love other Americans.
Because I think it can go one way or the other as well. Like I know a YouTuber in a very different industry who is Sydney based, who has an extraordinary American audience. And
that's cool.
I
could never get it, Rob. I tried.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's maybe a few more shout outs or
maybe
go and train with Christian Guzman or someone. But might happen. But so what do you think? What would you say over the last sort of 10 years, which is an extraordinary content career? What would you say the biggest lesson that you've come out with is, regarding anything, whether it's content focused or monetization or anything?
Biggest lesson. That's another good question. It's funny because when I came into the field of putting out content and doing stuff online, like I said, it was when it wasn't popular to do so. So, and there was not as much saturation in the market. So, in a sense, I was fortunate to build my audience like I did and have the reach that I did and get the opportunities that I did. But I definitely, now looking back, I realize like, it's interesting. I always try to think, hey, if I had to start my YouTube channel from zero right now, like, would I be able to do it again, you know? Because the climate was so different back then. So the one thing I've learned, I mean, I don't know, something I'm liking to the look of right now is just, man, honestly, that's a tough question for me. Because I've learned so much, but...
Top 3?
What's that?
Top 3?
Top 3, yeah, that's the top 3. I was gonna say something along the lines of putting out something like authentic and all this kind of stuff. But I know people that aren't authentic and they put out content and then they actually become really popular.
Sure.
Coming back from YouTube and social media and stuff like that, I like, one thing that I like as a lesson, I guess, is like, why... Yeah, you got me like deep in my head right now, Rob. You got me deep in my head.
How about I give you another question, and maybe something else will pop back into your head.
Okay.
I'm curious to know. Obviously, we touched on it at the start. We're in isolation in most parts, and with COVID and that sort of thing. How, as a personal trainer, has that affected you? Obviously, you're like an online coach predominantly, I'm guessing, more than in person. So the physical changes haven't been so much. But if you have all these personal trainers suddenly going online and the market becomes saturated with personal trainers because they can't work out of gyms, has there been an effect for someone like yourself who's been an online trainer for a longer time?
I don't think I've seen an effect in terms of any more competition coming in. But I feel like I've seen a lot of people who are PTs in the gym. They're struggling more than ever because they lost everything and they haven't had the, I guess, existing platforms like I do. But in saying that as well, even just a lot of their methods of training are predominantly based around gym equipment and barbells and like a full gym setup basically. So you're finding, even like myself, a lot of my training was really based around that before we went into the situation. So for me, at the start I was adapting with like how can I make bodybuilding workouts with water jugs, which is something people can have easy access to.
Sure, yeah.
And I saw actually a lot of success from that. I drove a lot of people to my website for the free program, which I was giving away, which, again, there was no direct sell or sales strategy, as opposed to, I mean, I guess it's kind of a strategy in terms of you're giving people value, but again, it's with no expectation. So I'm not expecting them to just like buy more stuff off me. If they do see the value and then they see other stuff on my website, they see my coaching there, like, that's cool. I actually have seen some, purchases and new clients on the back of, that what I did there. But yeah, like I was saying, even for that, training with the water jugs and stuff, that's just like an adaptment, or like adapting, which I had to do personally. But then I started thinking, okay, what other training can I do? So yeah, like for me personally, these last 4 weeks, I've been outside really just trying to expand my knowledge base, what I can do with body weight training, different varieties of, anything I can do just using my body, like push-ups is at least, if you got some handles, medicine ball, and there's so many different variations of things you can do. And like for me, I'm just trying to learn new ways to train and drill those in and get really good at those so that I can come out of this with more experience and, an alternative way instead of just with the gyms and stuff like that. But again, same for like usual PTs who have lost their jobs and stuff. I guess they're either having to do the same or a lot of them are just screwed,
But I guess you're able to put the time into, adapting and improving your knowledge and upgrading your programs and that sort of thing. You've already got the sales process in, you've already got a good audience, all that sort of thing. So I guess they're playing catch up to you rather than you seeing an influx of new competition.
Yeah, it is definitely a bit more like that. But in saying that as well, it's not like, I think, yeah, even for the first couple of weeks of this, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself personally, I felt, yeah, my business was affected in terms of even just with the majority of people tightening up with their money. And I know a lot of friends of mine who do online coaching, and they've already had a big customer base, and they do weekly payments off people. I was talking to one friend who, it says his livelihoods and income and everything is his online coaching, and he lost 75% of his clients,
Wow.
uh, just like that, pretty much in the first couple of weeks of this going down, with people saying, "Hey, we've lost their jobs,"
Yep.
or whatever the case is, and it's happened to a lot of people. Um, but again, I guess it's just being able to provide people an alternative. For him, I know a lot of his stuff was gym based online coaching, which people don't have access to the gyms anymore. So if you can't get a real fast turnaround in terms of, hey, don't worry that we don't have a gym, I can offer you some kind of relief in terms of really good body weight home workouts, or just something where you can really just justify how you can keep helping someone through this time. If you can't do that, you're screwed. And I've seen a lot of online coaches, they were really quick on doing that and making that change and seeing what they could do at home with resistance bands and not much, and then really putting that on display in terms of their advertising and their marketing. So yeah, there's people who have been screwed, who haven't been able to adapt fast enough, and there's people who have been okay because they've adapted pretty quick. But for me personally as well, like I said, I started off with the water jugs, which has helped a lot of people, I think. Well, I know from messages I've got, the amount of signups into my website to get that, those free programs. So, but for me personally, again, that wasn't enough. I wanted to see what else I can do. And so the last 4 weeks, I've just been practicing with so many new different ways of training outdoors and seeing what I can do with my body. And I'm not putting that out in a program or anything yet, because I want to put myself through it to see how effective it really is, or how I can really make a great program from new stuff I'm learning. But yeah, it's just adapting, isn't it? Yeah.
It's awesome. So one curiosity I've got as well, because you didn't intend to go into, say, merchandising. It was sort of a monetization exercise, or a revenue exercise. Were there any challenges in terms of finding retailers, managing stock, all that sort of thing? Because it's quite a lot to learn in a short space of time, and if you get the formula wrong, it can cost you a lot of money too.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. You might not know, Rob, but for me, my clothing brand was before my social media.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So a lot, because here's the issue. Like, a lot of people have come into these spaces and building online audiences, and then they get into their merch and all that kind of stuff. But there's a difference between merch and then an actual clothing company, which sits on its own brand. You know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of the time someone does merch as an extension of themselves, and there's like a way to monetize on what they're putting out, whether it's entertaining content, whatever it is. For me, I've always had my clothing brand, so that's been before I've put out any content online. I always wanted to make my brand, and so I made my brand before I was even putting out active content on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So but even still, yeah, to come back to your questions, it's been a huge process of you learn a lot. A lot of the thing with clothing is, and I've heard people say this before, it's almost like the low hanging fruit of entrepreneurship, especially for young people. I think they get excited, they see clothing brands they like, and they're like, oh, I can make this design on a shirt, and then I can start my own brand and be an entrepreneur myself, because it's not hard to do that, but it's hard to consistently do that over years and develop new products, and there's a lot more to it, and even just being on the edge with new designs and seeing what's coming in. And again as well, I think one big misconception people have with clothing is that, let's say you can get a t-shirt printed for let's say like $14-15 Australian or whatever it is, and then you can sell it for 40, that or 45 or even 50, that you've got that profit margin. But a lot of people don't realize there's more to it than just the margins on the product itself. And it's it's paying a videographer to create a marketing campaign or something like that, paying a model, or at least giving them a shirt or something, which everything you're doing is offsetting that margin of what you just might look at the one thing and say, oh, the margin's 300% on this product, so I'm going to be sweet. And then when you have to divide, let's say 50 shirts into different sizes with percentages, you have to work out which percentage is going to sell the most, which is going to sell the least. And for every shirt that you don't sell, that's money that you haven't recuperated into your profit margins. So there's just so much stuff like that people just don't even think about. So even for me, the issue has always been just refining, especially like the sizing ratio, I think is a big one that people don't think. Because if you get too many size smalls and then none of them sell, but you sold heaps of larges, all the smalls you didn't sell, they'll offset your profit margin pretty heavy from the ones you did sell.
Yeah, and then you get stuck with stock that you just can't move regardless of how hard you try.
And you can't move it. Like I literally have in my cupboard there's just so many size smalls of everything from the last probably 4 years of me, running that over here. They're just literally all sitting in my cupboard. I just took them off the website. I took all the smalls off, and I don't do size smalls anymore.
Well, I guess that's that sort of that iterative model, and you can refine the process over time. And another thing I suppose you have, compared to someone just starting up, you've learnt those lessons already, and so you can benefit more quickly out of something. But
yeah, definitely.
So where do you see things going? I know we still see a lot of confusion with TikTok and and Snapchat and everything. And while you can develop strategies for those, most brands that we see playing, especially on TikTok, they're just having a crack to see what comes out of it. Are you sort of watching those things closely, or are you just focused on what's working for now and just keeping a bit of an eye on them, but not sure really what to do yet?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in that space of keeping a bit of an eye on it, dabbling with it. TikTok's a real interesting one. I was on it maybe 8 months ago, and I started posting a couple of vids and got a little bit of traction, but then I just kind of stopped posting, and I was just for whatever reason, I was just like, I'm just taking a break from this. It was interesting to see. Now, 8 months later, you can see it's definitely a heavy player in the marketplace. I'm seeing a lot of brands actually using it very successfully to get their clothes on people who have big followings and stuff. That's something I've noticed a lot lately. There's definitely opportunities in there. I think if you come into any social media platform, if you, like you were saying, I think you summed it up quite well at the start of the chat. You said, in terms of the time frames of what people might spend on each platform, you said Instagram was just kind of the 0 to 30 seconds or whatever. Facebook's maybe the 1 to 10 minutes people will be doing stuff on, and then YouTube's the 10-minute plus vids. Again, TikTok's a new one as well, where it's extra short, isn't it? So, but it's just, you gotta, like anything, you just gotta analyze it and see if you're looking at it as a business opportunity or a way to maybe monetize off. You just gotta look at the characteristics of the platform and see what's. It's pretty easy to see what will do well in it. You know what I mean? And it's just the way you gotta look at anything, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think the interesting thing about anyone putting out content regularly with any decent success is that you are effectively data analysts in some way, because you have to be looking at these statistics of what's performing and what's not, or you'll put all your energy, say, into Facebook content, as you said, that maybe isn't getting the reach, whereas Instagram and YouTube is what you found works for you. Did you get any surprises along the way when you've sort of looked at data and something's really over or underperformed unexpectedly?
I mean, I guess it's a good question, but I feel like not really. It's funny, you almost. You can say you think you're going to make a viral vid, or you think, oh, this is going to do great, and then sometimes it flops. But then in hindsight, when you see a viral vid, you're like, well, this is why it was viral. It's because of this, this, and this. But then you go try recreate that, and you can't sometimes. So there's an element of, yeah, when you can see what's working, it's like, oh yeah, that's what works. But then sometimes you'll try and actually do something and you think it's going to work because it's got the characteristics and it just doesn't. So yeah, it's an interesting one. You're always, I guess, just got to be experimenting, just trying to put stuff in there and seeing how it goes. That's the only thing you can do, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that we notice with client work in particular is, the more authentic it is, the easier it is to produce, and the more reliable the results. So you may not get, say, 1 million views, but if you can put out 100 videos that get 10,000 views, then you still get there. But that, you can't predict that viral nature. And, so I guess, do you really advocate just, doing what you know and sort of, having a bit of a dabble in something unique, but really just sort of sticking to the plan and evolving it over time gradually?
Yeah, I think your best bet, and then let's say if you're a business or an individual or whatever, even me I'm a business and I'm an individual, but I'm still always trying to, ideally I want to be monetizing and be able to make a living off what I do, obviously. So I find that as long as you're just being authentic with the message that you want to put out, or your business, if you're being authentic with the product you want to put out or what your product can do for people, that's all you can do. I've been down routes where I've tried to just get really, really popular and just try to be viral or see what's like trending or what's going on. And I've ended up just failing at it, whether maybe it's done all right, but it hasn't done anything for my business.
Sure.
Maybe it's got me a few more followers, but is it even the followers that I want? Just because something gets a lot of views doesn't mean they're all people that are going to buy your stuff. Especially if it's something that you're doing something different to go viral and it's not even in relation to your business, you know what I mean? So I think that for anyone out there, that's really important to understand. Like you're saying before, we know people with millions of followers who struggle to monetize, and then we know people with, a few hundred followers or a few thousand, just a couple of thousand followers, and they monetize insanely well on these platforms. And I think that's the main thing. You just got to try not to get statistics of likes or views or whatever messed up with the statistics of your actual business and your margins and your revenue.
Yeah. So I mean, how important is it to really find those genuine followers, and how do you not get caught up in the metrics? We ran an interesting experiment. I created a brand new Instagram account, and we're actually making a video about this piece in a little while, and paid $160 to get 10,000 likes, just to essentially gather data to prove this point. And because you can poorly monetize followers, and these guys don't care who I am, what I do. I think 2,500 of them have already fallen back off. And so it's hard as people not to get caught up in the vanity metrics of social media. How do you kind of stay true to your purpose? And is it purely from that the sales data will prove you right, or is it just are you just super zen and really just know what to do?
It's all, as myself, even for all the years I've had in this, that's been a big thing for me to shift my headspace around, is the likes and the views, and changing that into the perspective of, because I've always associated popularity and massive attention with you're just definitely successful. But what happens when you have to do something different to be popular, or that's not really in line with you or your business? You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't feel right. And even my biggest challenge over these last probably couple of years is just remembering and realizing that there's my business, and sometimes I'll post a video on YouTube showing my new Gymsties launch or something like that, and the vid gets the least views out of all my vids for the last few months, yet I've managed to sell thousands of dollars of products. But I'm thinking, oh well, this vid did shit. It's only got 90 likes on my YouTube channel compared to usual maybe 200 likes or something like that. Yet because of that vid, I've made all this money. Yet I'm upset that it's got half the likes or views of one of my other vids. Yeah, it's kind of stupid.
I think it's the unseen metric of all this data as well. As you can see the likes, but you can never assume how much of that is converting into sales, or through whatever means supporting that channel.
Yeah, and that's what's hard when you're doing stuff organically. When you've got an actual marketing strategy and paying for advertising campaigns, constructing advertising campaigns, you get that data all laid out for you. So, and that's something that I'm kind of trying to understand and learn, because for me, I've had it easy because I've had a good organic reach where I can make a living without having to pay for advertising. But I'm now I'm trying to get my head around the advertising model, and because you can see it's a bit less of a headache when you can actually see what's doing what and the exact numbers behind it. Whereas sometimes for me, I struggle because it's just random. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Sometimes I don't know what caused this month to be better than the last month because for whatever
didn't
reason.
Really change anything. It just was. Yeah. I mean, I think one interesting thing that you'll see is when you do start to move paid promotions and you've got a organic audience to springboard from anyway. Typically, the conversion cost from the advertising will be much lower. And it sort of helps activate your organic audience, and it's sort of a supplement as opposed to, someone starting from cold might be paying $1 or $2 a click, but you might be able to get it for 10 cents because you've got that warm audience, and that rate of conversion will be so much higher. So I think that's
yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. Like, there's been points I haven't done much cold advertising with any of my stuff, but sometimes I dabble in the Facebook ads platform. And it's a lot easier for me to put my new Gym Steez campaign, or if we've got like a Black Friday sale, I can put a little vid and just target it to people who already follow me. And I've seen, successful conversions like that without just running any testing, because I'm just putting it at my audience.
And I think that's really the value in the audience that you've got as well. When you do want to put something out, you can do it cost effectively and really quickly, and get good results. So we're coming up on time, and I've really enjoyed this chat. For everyone who's watching or listening or whatever, where can they find you and learn about Freezma Fitness?
Yeah, I guess YouTube's always the best place to start, isn't it?
Just a bit of a search on Freezma Fitness.
If you really want to know me, you can go on YouTube and you'll really get to know me. Go on Instagram, I guess you could still find me, but yeah, everything's just Freezma. So.
Cool. We'll put it in the show notes. And thank you very much for your time, Freezma Fitness. I really appreciate your insight into social and how it's changed, and wish you all the best, and we'll chat soon.
No worries. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
There you have it. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please like it, share it, or leave us a review on your favourite platform. It helps us show more of this content to people just like you.